You're terminated, Miss Barrett, effective immediately. Those words didn't echo. They detonated right there in the Grand Hotel ballroom, between the lavish buffet and the branded useless stress balls. The CEO's voice slid through the PA like oil on wet tile, smug, slithery, rehearsed. My question hadn't even finished echoing in the microphone when it happened. Could you clarify why the internal sustainability audit from Q3 2022 never appeared in the compliance report, even though legal confirmed its submission? That's as far as I got. I hadn't yelled, hadn't grandstanded, just raised my hand and calmly read off a question I'd been sitting on for months. That question had teeth, but so did I. Or at least, I thought I used to. Now I stood frozen, holding a yellow legal pad like it might shield me from 1,000 blinking eyes, 1,000 murmuring mouths. Someone coughed, someone laughed. My stomach twisted. And let this serve as a reminder. The CEO oozed, eyes glittering under LED lights, that we welcome curiosity, but not disruption. The entire room had gone mannequin silent. Security didn't touch me, but they hovered. I moved stiffly, legs wooden, ears hot, past neatly folded napkins, past my director's stunned expression, past 2 interns recording the meeting on phones they pretended weren't filming. I walked out, one heel slipping slightly on the marble floor. For a heartbeat, I considered turning around, saying something, but my voice was somewhere beneath my shoes, crushed and forgotten. I hit the lobby. That's when I heard it. Shoes behind me. Purposeful. Expensive. Not security, Miss Barrett? I turned slowly, automatically. It was him, Victor Maris. This man didn't do public. He barely spoke during investor calls. When he did, stock prices trembled. His net worth had a comma for each decade of my life. He stopped about a foot away. No tie, gray suit, eyes like cold coffee. Could you, he asked softly, repeat that question for me? I blinked, my mouth opened. Nothing came out. My brain, still spinning from the slap of sudden unemployment, tripped on its own logic. About the compliance record, Q3, the environmental audit. It was submitted, but... Victor nodded once. No smile, no follow-up, just a nod like a gavel. Then he turned and walked straight back into that room like nothing had happened. And that's when I felt it, flickering behind the embarrassment, behind the static in my ears. Something, a pulse, a glimmer. Not pride, not yet, but the opposite of defeat. The kind of flicker you feel right before the storm hits, and for the first time in hours, you don't run for cover. By the way, if you're still listening and not just folding laundry to this chaos, do me one tiny favor. Hit subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 of you beautiful chaos lovers so I can keep exposing these corporate soap operas. Don't make me beg like HR at a harassment seminar. I walked out of that hotel into a fogged-up October afternoon, jobless, scandalized, vaguely radioactive. I didn't even make it to my car before my work email deactivated mid-scroll. Just a soft authentication error and a spinning wheel of death. No warning, no we'll be in touch. They weren't just done with me. They were trying to erase me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in the blazer I'd worn to the shareholder meeting, staring at the bedroom wall like it owed me answers. My laptop hummed softly in the dark, open Slack tab blinking not authorized, my corporate inbox frozen mid-refresh, and the last sent message to my boss left unread like a ghost in the machine. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the CEO's smug little smirk, heard the way he bit off the word disruptive like I'd committed arson in a cathedral instead of asking a question about a missing audit report. By 3:12 a.m., I'd gone full doom spiral. Resume ruined, career dead, tainted with a scarlet compliance mark. My references probably already briefed by legal, my HR file edited, sanitized, weaponized. Then came the ping, LinkedIn. New request. No profile picture. Name Travis Bean. Headline, risk consultant, independent. No work history. One connection. His message. Saw what they did to you? You were right. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My first instinct was to delete it, block the guy, burn it down. But something in my spine twitched. I clicked accept. The second I did, the profile vanished. User no longer exists. That's when my phone buzzed again. Different app this time. Duo. Two-factor authentication fail. Then another. My company portal, the one I used to download restricted compliance files during reviews, was suddenly inaccessible. I tried my alternate path, the old employee wiki. This account has been deactivated. A chill set in, deeper than unemployment. This wasn't just a cut and run. They were scrubbing me systematically, like I never existed, like the files I worked on, the notes I left, the reports I filed. None of it had ever touched their servers. Except it had. And I knew where it had. I shoved my laptop aside and pulled out the dusty Western Digital external drive I hadn't used since 2019. Still had the sticker from my old cube on it. Compliance. We notice SHIT, you don't. I plugged it in. A whir, a beep. Then folders bloomed onto the screen. Vendor Sustainability 2022, Temp Reporting Overrides, Wellspring Project/Legal Review, V3 Draft. Buried under layers of archival sludge was my paper trail. Not everything, but enough to remind me I wasn't crazy. That report had existed. I'd submitted it. I had the timestamp metadata to prove it. I started copying, organizing, labeling every weird carbon credit discrepancy, every unexplained override in the vendor rating algorithm, every time legal had said, "Not our jurisdiction." I even found an old PDF of a Slack exchange where a junior analyst had asked, "Are we supposed to delete this?" And my manager replied with an upside-down face emoji. At 5:42 a.m., I poured myself black coffee from a chipped mug that read World's Analyst and stared at a growing folder named, "If I go down, you're coming with me." This wasn't damage control anymore. It was evidence. It was war prep. They hadn't just fired me. They were trying to turn me into vapor. But Julia had something they didn't. A sharp memory and undeniable receipts. The message didn't come through email. It came through Proton Mail. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I know that report." I hesitated before opening it. My fingers hovered, still smelling faintly of whatever anxiety sweat had soaked into my sleeves the night before. I clicked. I used to be in internal audit. I left before the layoffs last year. Voluntary, not IND-OD. I saw your name in the metadata of a report that was deleted before it went to board review. Someone ordered it buried. You were right to ask about it. Attached was a single image, a heavily redacted screenshot of a file tree. At the bottom, a file name, Wellspring Sub Q3 EB94 FOL. I didn't need a decoder ring to know what EB94 meant. My employee ID. It was the exact report I had uploaded into the compliance system last year, the one I'd flagged to legal with a 2-line warning. Discrepancy in vendor carbon credits. Possible internal override. Please advise. I hadn't heard back until now. There was one visible timestamp in the image. The report had been marked as archived less than 48 hours after I submitted it. Not approved, not reviewed, archived. A digital term that meant, put this in a hole and pretend it never happened. I stared at the screen. My heart was thumping, but my hands were calm now. Anger has a way of flattening the panic, boiling it into something sharper. I wrote back, "Do you have more?" No reply. Instead, 10 minutes later, I got a call from a number I recognized. Jared. We used to eat lunch in the second-floor cafeteria, trading passive-aggressive crossword hints and complaining about the air conditioning. He had been in logistics, quiet, kind, definitely not the whistleblower type. He spoke low. "Look, I probably shouldn't be calling," he started, "but you need to know. HR is already putting things out there. Things." He paused. "That you were under a lot of stress. That you might have snapped. Something about your behavior being erratic lately. Lisa, my manager, said the head of HR told her you'd been flagged a while ago for instability." I didn't speak. Couldn't. The rage was curling in my throat like smoke. "Oh," Jared added, "and they're implying you might have made the report up, that it didn't exist." I almost laughed. It came out like a bark. "Tell Lisa," I said, voice tight as a rusted screw, "that the only unstable thing about me is how many damn copies I made of that report." I hung up before he could respond. The smear was happening fast, faster than I expected. They weren't just severing ties. They were torching the ground behind me so no one would follow. Mental health issues. That old playbook, Corporate Gaslighting 101. I opened a new document, titled it Disinformation Tracking, logging every call, every comment, every person who suddenly went quiet. I even screen recorded Jared's voicemail, narrating it as I did. Tuesday, 8:13 a.m. Jared from Logistics confirms HR is spreading mental health rumors. Noted, if they wanted to paint me as unstable, I'd show them how organized crazy could get. The email from Proton Mail blinked again. There are more of us. We're watching how they react. You're not alone. I didn't smile. For the first time since walking out of that ballroom, I felt something just as dangerous. Fuel. 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted. Long enough for me to second-guess everything. Long enough for the caffeine to stop working and the adrenaline to dry out into something bitter, like stale gum pressed into the underside of my thoughts. Victor Maurice hadn't called. No texts, no lawyers, no cryptic nods passed through private LinkedIn messages or burner emails. Nothing. For all I knew, his quiet nod outside the ballroom was just an old man's reflex, polite concern for the crazy woman unraveling in front of a Hilton coat check. I began to fold in on myself. Maybe I had misread it. Maybe Victor was just doing the billionaire version of clapping for the weird kid in the school play, a gesture empty and harmless. I was in the middle of labeling PDFs for a new backup folder. Evidence 3 acted if they sue me. The call came in. Unknown number. Cleveland area code. I debated answering, then did, half out of instinct, half out of boredom. "Julia Barrett?" a woman asked, crisp voice fast but not rushed. "Yes, this is Kayla Arment from the Daily Ledger. You've probably seen our name floating around the shareholder fallout." "I haven't," I lied. "Well, I'll get to the point. Do you want to make a comment about your whistleblower status?" I froze. "My what?" "We're running a piece. One of your major investors, Victor Maris, briefed us on the shareholder call. He didn't say much, but he called you an individual with moral clarity who raised questions the board refused to answer." My mouth went dry. Kayla kept going. "He refused to go on record beyond that, but you're named. It's a soft name, but it's there. So, I'm asking, were you terminated in retaliation for whistleblowing?" I glanced at my wall. I'd taped sticky notes in a pattern that now looked less like an evidence board and more like an emotional breakdown in pastel. I stalled. "Is that what you're going with? That I'm a whistleblower?" That word. It sounded so clean, like something with a hotline and a handbook, not like what I'd lived, not like being locked out of servers at 2 a.m., not like someone calling me unstable behind my back, not like watching a report disappear into corporate airspace. But still, Victor said it, not me. He'd thrown my name into the storm, gently but intentionally. I hadn't imagined it. "I guess that depends on how you define it," I said finally. Kayla chuckled. Well, take that as a pending comment. We're publishing tomorrow. I hung up without saying goodbye, and now the silence meant something different. Victor had heard me. He had believed me. He didn't call because he didn't need to. He already put me in play. Now I was a piece on the board. My phone buzzed again. Twitter notification. Moral clarity was trending locally. Another buzz, this time from Signal. Message from an unknown contact. They're scared now. Be smart. They'll try to spin it. Attached. A screenshot of a Slack message from a senior compliance officer at the company. Her name, a warning, a containment strategy. I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't my fight anymore, not just mine. I was a symbol now, a vector. They were watching me, the company, the board, the investors, the press. And Victor, he was the one who made sure everyone had their eyes on me. Not to protect me, to see what I'd do next. I was halfway through my third rewatch of the same 3-minute clip from the shareholder meeting, my voice calm, steady, echoing into silence right before the CEO butchered my name on the public termination, when it hit me. Not a revelation, a password. Cold Stack 192. It was a throwaway phrase I'd used back when the company transitioned its internal storage to an off-site server farm, one of those temporary archive systems that everyone promptly forgot existed once the new SA compliance platform rolled in and buried it all under layers of bells, whistles, and auto-deletes. I remembered I hadn't touched that system in over 2 years, not since I used it to manually back up my notes from an energy compliance summit because the internal project manager kept accidentally deleting documents that didn't align with the PR team's goals. I logged in. To my shock, the server was still live. Outdated UI. Clunky file trees. Ugly font that screamed Windows XP nostalgia, but live. And inside, everything. Drafts of quarterly reports that were never published. Email chains where VPs debated whether carbon credits could be creatively forecasted based on projected offsets. A memo where legal literally wrote, "If we don't acknowledge the discrepancy, technically it doesn't exist." Then came the jackpot. A deleted compliance summary for Q3 dated 6 months after my original report was archived. Someone had pulled my findings, stripped my name, reworded it into a soft warning that data synchronization issues made proper environmental review impossible that quarter. In other words, we lost the files. Wink, wink. They didn't bury the truth. They rebranded it. I stared at my screen, every tab a new form of inculpation and a new liability. This was no longer about one report. It was about a company-wide pattern of sanitizing non-compliance into marketing buzzwords. I zipped the files, labeled the folder Shareholder Packet A, Confidential Source 001. Then I created a burner email. Then I found the mailing list, the one my ex-girlfriend once showed me, laughing, saying, "These rich bastards will open anything with the word divestiture in it." At 2:39 a.m., I hit send. Subject line, "Review immediately. Compliance concerns, RGS Holdings." Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. By 7:15 a.m., internal Slack at my former company lit up like a Christmas tree on lithium. Someone from IT leaked a screenshot. Why is the old cold stack server still up? Did anyone authorize the data dump? Delete the backups now. Then who the hell sent this to the investors? The CEO wasn't tagged, but legal was. Then someone made the mistake of dropping the word whistleblower in the open channel. HR immediately purged the thread, not before another employee screenshotted it and DM'd me from a burner Reddit account. "You're not alone." I stared at the chaos from my safe distance. For the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting. I was orchestrating. And buried in the file I'd sent, the one slide I knew would trigger a deeper panic, was a line item flagged as adjusted offsets, vendor estimate only. It referred to a third-party contractor that allegedly planted trees to offset shipping emissions, but in the real numbers, those trees didn't exist. The carbon credits were fictional. I had only dropped one packet. I had 4 more, each with more teeth. And this time, I wasn't burning bridges. I was lighting them from both ends. I barely had time to finish my cereal, dry because milk felt too optimistic, when the first message came in. Burner Proton Mail. Subject: You're not the only one they erased. Inside, a scanned NDA, redacted signatures, a timestamp from the peak of last year's strategic downsizing initiative. The message underneath was short. Just, I was in data audit. They paid me to leave and stay silent. Didn't say I had to forget. If you leak this, don't say my name, but keep swinging. Attached, a memo from the same internal compliance server I had just raided, detailed temporary overrides of key financial flags during quarterly reporting, marked explicitly for internal audience only. I leaned forward. The language was slippery, buried in jargon, but I could read it like sheet music. The override let them reclassify vendor reimbursements as carbon offsets in certain quarters. Translation? They were turning refund requests into eco-points. By the time I opened Signal, my heart was a drumline. Another message. No text. Just a file upload. USB Financial Archive Final, EBC. I recognized the initials before I even opened it. EBC equals Executive Blind Copy. I used to prepare EPS during quarterly compliance reviews. They were not standard reports. They were curated, toned-down briefings sent only to the C-suite, sanitized for narrative clarity. This USB was different. It wasn't sanitized. Side spreadsheets tracking discretionary logistics allocations, which sounded harmless until I cross-referenced the vendors. Private jets, 5-star resorts, rental cars in cities with no corporate hubs, passenger lists labeled Guest 1. One name caught my eye. Alyssa Merritt, the CEO's daughter. 3 trips to Lake Como, 1 to Bora Bora, all billed under vendor relations review. One line item even said, organic catering, altitude-sourced menu. I nearly choked on my spoon. By noon, a third message came through. Encrypted voice, the kind of thing paranoid tech bros use before launching crypto startups or whistleblowing on 3-letter agencies. The voice was distorted but calm. We met at the 23 ethics offsite. I was on the legal side. I kept quiet because I had kids in private school, but your archive file, that stirred the hive. The board is scrambling, and there's more. Look up Agri Transfer Memo V4. You'll know it when you see it. Also, nice touch with the packet title, bold, then click. I opened a new doc. Incoming leads. Verified. I began organizing everything, tagging evidence, cross-linking terms. My desktop looked like a prosecutor's fever dream. And still the sentence from my first burner contact wouldn't leave my head. You were right to ask about it. All of this because I asked one question. Fired a mid-level compliance analyst. They forgot I color-coded corruption. They forgot I saved everything. And now my focus was blade sharp. No more doubt, no more whiplash. This wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about exposure. Because the thing about people like Julia, they don't come for revenge. They come with receipts. The memo was a masterpiece of corporate spin. Passive-aggressive prose wrapped in HR-scented perfume and printed on letterhead that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Subject: regarding recent media activity by former employee E. Barrett. It opened with a hollow throat clear, as you may have seen in recent headlines. Then it got nasty. I was described as emotionally compromised, possibly acting out of personal grievance, and most cutting of all, showing patterns of unstable behavior during her final weeks of employment. No names were signed at the bottom, just Office of the CEO, but everyone knew who wrote it. The message was clear. Discredit the messenger, smear the woman, call her emotional, irrational, vengeful. What the CEO didn't know. The memo leaked within 3 hours. Screenshots were circulating on Reddit under the title, CEO Gaslights Ex-Employee Gets Ratioed. By the end of the day, it hit LinkedIn. Executives were liking and unliking it so fast it looked like a cardiac monitor. And then Victor Maris finally moved. Not publicly, not yet, but word came through a whisper chain I had learned to trust. Victor had requested a private board session, emergency topic, leadership credibility review. No agenda, no minutes, no PR team allowed in the room. Hours later, a scheduled press conference to unveil the company's new Sustainability Vision 2030 was quietly yanked from the website. No reason given, but the timing wasn't subtle. I, meanwhile, had already prepared my final card, the one I swore I'd only play if they tried to drag my name through corporate mud. And oh, had they dragged. So now I gave the internet a gift. The file drop was small, simple, a 3-page PDF. Subject line, RGS Logistics Disbursement Trail V1. Inside, payment transfers from a holding account in Delaware to a series of flagged offshore entities in St. Kitts and Nevis. Invoice records from RGS Logistics, a shell company with no employees, no office, no tax ID until 3 months after the first transfer. The final page, a signed approval chain including the CFO and the CEO. I included no commentary, no preamble, just the documents, just the data. I uploaded it to a transparency watchdog form under the username Barrett was here. And then I walked away from my laptop and poured myself a drink I couldn't afford when I worked for them. Within 6 hours, it was all over. Reddit threads, Substacks, finance Twitter. Is RGS Logistics the new Enron? I wasn't wrong. I was just early. Victor Maurice's silence suddenly very loud. The twist wasn't that I had been telling the truth. The twist was that my question, the one that got me fired, wasn't even the real scandal. It was just the doorway. They built the whole damn company on fake trees and funneled cash. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It never really was. They tried to make me the story, the distraction, the scapegoat. But now, the story had a heartbeat of its own. It was systemic. The boardroom at RGS's downtown tower wasn't designed for war. It was designed for theater, walnut table, leather chairs, soft lighting that made everything look expensive and in control. But when Victor Maurice walked in that morning, the mood shifted like a dropped scalpel. No assistant, no entourage, just Victor and a manila folder tucked under his arm, like a doctor arriving to confirm the test results you already feared. He sat without waiting, no greetings, no banter. He slid the folder across the table and said simply, "This is the only question that matters." The chairman blinked. The CEO tried to speak. Victor raised a hand. No spin, no marketing language, no PR script. Just answer the question. The sheet inside was simple. One line printed in 14-point calibri. Can you explain why the environmental compliance audit from Q3 2022, submitted by E. Barrett and confirmed as received by legal, was never included in board review documents or financial disclosures? No one moved. Victor tapped a single finger on the edge of the table. "If you can't answer this by end of day," he said flatly, "I will call for motion to suspend the CEO and CFO pending audit review. And I won't be the only one." He stood, smoothed his jacket. Then came the real gut punch. Another investor walked in, then another, each holding a copy of the same single sheet. Not shouting, not grandstanding, just presence. The message was clear. This wasn't Victor going rogue. This was a coalition forming. I, meanwhile, sat on my couch with a coffee ring bleeding into my favorite notebook, and a cat I didn't own curled up by my foot like some stray karma. I hadn't opened the blinds in 2 days, but the room was lit partly by sunlight, mostly by the blue glow of incoming pings. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find a courier holding a manila envelope. "Julia Barrett?" I nodded. He handed me the envelope and speed-walked away like it was radioactive. I opened it. Cease and desist. Unauthorized disclosure. The letterhead was off-center. The body was written in boilerplate legalese, half of which was copied from a Google template. And the cherry on top? They spelled my name, Elaine. I barked a laugh so loud the cat bolted under the couch. They were panicking. I could see it in the sloppiness, the recycled threats, the desperate theater of legal muscle without a working spell checker. I folded the letter once, then again, and slid it under my coffee mug as an impromptu coaster. Then I opened my laptop. A new file waited in my drafts. RGS Response Summary, Final Brief for Victor. It wasn't just for him anymore. It was for every investor who'd stopped seeing dividends as answers, for every employee still quietly leaking her Slack screenshots, for every outsider now watching the story unfold like a slow-motion landslide. I didn't feel rage. I felt precision. The storm was coming, but this was the moment just before. The air still, the sky wide, and in every corner of the tower, the question echoed like a countdown. Why was the report buried? Tick-tock boom. The emergency shareholder meeting wasn't streamed on any official platform. No press passes, no glossy handouts or brand slogans projected behind smug executives sipping cucumber water. It was hosted in a plain beige conference room at a private financial firm. No windows, no cameras, just quiet men and women with controlling stakes and colder eyes. But one of them, one intern, one assistant, one somebody, leaked the feed. I found the link tucked anonymously into my inbox at 9:57 a.m. Subject line, "If you're going to watch history, wear something comfy." I clicked, and there it was. Victor Maris, seated dead center at the U-shaped table, holding the same single sheet of paper he'd brought to the board meeting 3 days ago. The room stilled as he cleared his throat. He read the question word for word. Can you explain why the environmental compliance audit from Q3 2022, submitted by E. Barrett and confirmed as received by legal, was never included in board review documents or financial disclosures? Silence. The CEO, suddenly very human in the face, licked his lips. One board member shifted, another pretended to flip pages they'd already read. Then came a voice from the right side of the room. I move to vote. Another followed. Seconded. Victor didn't smile, didn't flinch. Motion is now active, he said. The feed zoomed out. The hands went up, slow at first, then all at once. My screen flickered with the digital echo of 1,000 consequences. I sat frozen, hand over my mouth, as the room voted almost unanimously to suspend the CEO and CFO, effective immediately, freeze all executive compensation until the audit was completed, launch a full investigation into offshore transactions and false sustainability disclosures. Then came the final note. Victor stood. One more motion. Someone groaned. Victor! He ignored it. I moved to establish a new independent ethics committee reporting directly to shareholders, with a rotating chair. First term will be handled by the only person in this room who had the guts to ask the right question. He turned, facing the camera. Julia Barrett. I dropped my coffee. The screen glitched for a moment, froze on the CEO's face, his expression folding in on itself like a soufflé struck by a sledgehammer. Mouth open, eyes vacant, everything crumbling. Victor sat back down. The room didn't erupt in applause. That's not how real power moves. It settled like dust after demolition. I stared at the screen. I hadn't asked to lead. I hadn't even asked to be remembered. I asked a question, and now I was the answer. Not a martyr, not a rebel, not even a hero. Just a woman who refused to shut up. And in a system built on silence, that was louder than anything. The lesson from this story is that truth always holds immense power, and a resilient individual can bring about significant change within a corrupt system. Never underestimate the strength of asking the right questions and persistently seeking the truth, even when faced with threats and defamation. Courage and transparency can expose wrongdoing, bring about justice, and inspire others to stand up.